Teatime with Matt's bedtime story, folks. We've got your 5 words. We've got fail, deer, rabbit, wagon, and Dalek. So I've now got to weave this into a weird and wonderful story for you all. Got an idea in mind? Let's run with it. Settle yourselves down, grab a mug of hot cocoa or whatever it is you drink to relax. Get your blankets and snuggle up and everything, all of the things. And get yourself comfortable. And let's begin Teatime with Matt's bedtime story. This is the story of a man called Peter Kent, a name that I have just made up. Peter worked as a journalist for the Scratchwood and District Times, a local newspaper which chronicled the goings-on in the sleepy little village and surrounding area of Scratchwood. Peter hated his job at the Scratchwood and District Times. The most exciting thing that had happened in recent weeks was Doctor Who filming further down the valley, and several Daleks paying a visit to a local charity event to aid squirrels with broken limbs or something. Apparently that helped raise money because kids love Daleks. And adults. Yeah. Anyway, that was the biggest story Peter had covered in weeks. Peter was a drinker. He'd been to Alcoholics Anonymous, and he'd been on the wagon now for about 4 years. But his boring job at the Scratchwood and District Times was really making him feel like he wanted to just drink himself into a stupor and not wake up. Peter Kent was a very, very darkly depressed man. I know, this story is a bit dark, I'm sorry. Feeling like he was getting nowhere, Peter Kent decided to pay a visit to his friend Stanley, who lived at 427 Parable Street in Scratchwood. I'm going to wait for the gamers to get that joke. On his way to his friend Stanley's house, Peter saw a deer and a rabbit frolicking through the fields. And Peter started to think that maybe life wasn't so bad after all. Sure, he had a boring job, but there had to be a story somewhere in the world. There had to be. Somewhere in this beautiful, quiet country village, there had to be a story that was worthy of getting him onto the front page of the Scratchwood and District Times newspaper. With new purpose in his life, Peter knocked on the door of his friend Stanley at 427 Parable Street. Said Matt, knocking on the table to emphasise the fact that Peter was knocking on Stanley's door. Stanley invited Peter in and they sat down and had a cup of tea. "How are you feeling, Pete?" said Stanley. Not so good," said Peter. "I'm so bored at work at the moment. There is no good news in this place at all. I feel like I've got nothing I can possibly write about." "That's interesting," said Stanley. "Do you know, I was having a conversation with a mate at work the other day, and we were talking about this sort of thing. I mentioned that you were a journalist, and we said that every journalist, once in their career, has just one opportunity to write a story about a particular subject." "What's that?" said Peter. "They have one opportunity to write an article about writer's block." Peter frowned. "So you're saying I should do an article about the fact I haven't got anything to write about?" "Exactly that," said Stanley. "Oh, come on, Stanley," said Peter. "That's ridiculous. Who would read that? I mean, what kind of narcissistic, waistcoat-wearing, tea-drinking moron would make up a load of content for potentially 2 hours of live radio about not having anything to talk about? What kind of narcissistic weirdo would torture people into thinking that they hadn't planned anything when the whole plan and theme of their show all along was not having anything to talk about? What kind of narcissist would do that?"
"Hello, Kettle. I'm Pod. I just called to let you know you're black."
"You know what, you're right," said Stanley. "It's a horrible idea." "I'm glad you agree," said Peter, and they drank their tea and went their separate ways. And Matt gazed lovingly at his wonderful audience in the chat room and uttered only one single word. Yeah, you know I said I felt guilty.
It was all an act.
Yeah. Let's have the long jingle, folks. So what did we learn from this week's show? Well, first of all, I'm a better actor than I realised I was.
Yeah.
We learnt that, people who present online radio shows have one opportunity in their career to present a show where the theme is having absolutely nothing to talk about. And we learned that my audience is absolutely wonderful, if slightly gullible, and will help me get through anything. So, I mean this genuinely, I do feel guilty for playing this joke on you guys. But yeah, hands up, this was the plan all along. This week's theme, folks, this week we were talking all about not having anything to talk about on the show. It's meta.
Yeah.
I feel so cruel right now. But thank you for playing along, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. It actually turned out way better than I expected. I was kind of expecting that I was going to have to fess up a lot earlier than that.
No, this worked out nicely. I'm just glad to help out with
beautifully. So thank you so much, everyone, for playing along. You've been brilliant. And I do just want to end on this note. And I mean, yeah, I know I've been a bit of a git. And I know I've...
we all are.
Yeah. I know I've played on your emotions and betrayed your tiny trust a bit tonight. And I'm sorry. But it does prove one thing. It proves that if I ever did have a situation where I had no content, you guys would come through for me. And that is absolutely marvellous. And like I said last week during my common sense advice about how to present a radio show in the traditional way, you guys are what makes the show. And you proved that tonight because you were brilliant. You thought I was cracking up and suffering, and you came through for me. And that's awesome. So give yourselves a pat on the back because you guys rock. And I'm sorry. That I know it's cruel. But yeah, that was Tea Time with Matt, and our topic this week was, of course, all about having absolutely nothing to talk about. Thank you for playing along. I will see you next week. I promise not to play such a cruel joke on any of you again. It's you got to admit, though, it turned out quite well. I'm quite pleased.
Yeah.
I'm really pleased. This is you guys done good. You guys done good. Thank you.
Maybe next year we'll have a topic on gaming.
Maybe next year. We'll get round to it someday. Okay, folks, I will see you next week for the Christmas special. Tune in, same time next week, livestream.com/Tea Time with Matt, where we promise to have planned the content every single time, even when it seems like we haven't.
Yeah.
Take care, folks. Good night, and I'll see you next
Bye!
week. Bye!